Some More Outdoor, Episode 6.
Welcome to Some More Outdoor, where we speak with authors, entrepreneurs, and business owners about how the outdoors has affected their life and their projects. This show is to remind you of the healing properties of the outdoors. So, are you ready to learn what the nature effect can do for your life? Well, here's your host, Brett Trout.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Some More Outdoor. I'm your host, Brett Trout, and this is the podcast dedicated to reminding you to get out and experience the nature effect. My goal is to help you reestablish a connection with nature so you can live with childlike wonder again. So thanks for joining me today. I'm so excited to have a very special guest here, Andrew Arnold. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thanks, Brett. It's great to be here. Looking forward to our time together.
Thank you so much. Andrew is the executive director of Solid Rock Outdoor Ministries. That is a premier, Christ-centered, deep wilderness ministry. As a young boy, he began to climb with his father, uncle, and cousins. His life was changed by the grace of Jesus Christ and the love of the Father on a Harrower Peak overlooking Titcomb Basin during a course in the summer of 1999. Since that encounter, Andrew has been passionate and convinced that SROM is part of the kingdom of God to change, reach, touch, and equip individuals. Andrew joined the ministry in 1999 as full-time staff to help his father, Drew Arnold, who founded SROM, and in 2003, he was appointed as the executive director. So I've given a little overview, Andrew, of who you are and what you do, but if you can expound on that and go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brett. It was growing up in my dad and mom's home, spending time outside was really something I can remember doing from my very first memories, actually. And my dad did found SROM in the summer of 1983. So I grew up in this context of backpacking and rock climbing and mountaineering, and just really fell in love with being outside, being in creation, and all the wonder and joy that brings. So, and I could talk more about it later on, but in that summer of 1999, as you mentioned in the introduction, I really had a formative, life-changing experience where I realized many things, but I realized how real God was and how I could serve him and bless others by bringing them out into the outdoors, out into creation to experience the wonder of creation and experience him. And so that's really led me to where I am today as the executive director of the ministry. I consider myself blessed to be able to do something I really love and care about and makes a difference in people's lives.
Oh, absolutely. And I love what your organization stands for and the fact that you have that passion to be able to help people to get out and go on these excursions and go on these trips as long as 40 days, from what I understand. To be able to go and connect, and that's 40 days is definitely a long time, and I've never been on an excursion like that, and so the impact that I could imagine that it would have on my life would be phenomenal. So I really appreciate what you're doing and what you're teaching. How young do you take people?
Yeah, you typically our general audience is 18 to 30, 35-year-olds. However, we'll take junior high and high school students, and then we'll also take adults and young adults and middle-aged adults, past that 30-year-old threshold. As late in life as 65 years old, we've had participants on our trips. So we'll do courses or expeditions that maybe focus on, like, for instance, an all-women's course where we'll do a 7-day backpacking trip for women. And on that course, you might have an 18-year-old and you might have a 60-year-old together out on the trail. And those can be real formative. And we'll also do father-family courses where a father and his daughter or a father and his son will go out for 7-day courses together. So you might get an older dad, say in his 60s, and, a son or daughter 14, 15, 16 years old. Yeah, it's quite an age range that we serve and provide these opportunities for.
Yeah, and it's such an amazing opportunity, especially in today's day and age where the kids that are growing up these days have electronics around them all the time and don't get outdoors to experience all of that. And, I think as I've pursuing my entrepreneurial spirit that I like to, I know how important it is when I need to think and to be able to get outside and just connect with myself and connect with God in places like Yosemite and Sequoia, and just to kind of eliminate those distractions from our lives. What you're doing is just it's an amazing thing. And I really appreciate what God has placed on your heart to do and what you've taken from that and gone on to create in your life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of our philosophically, as we just think about kind of the philosophical basis or principles for why we do what we do, we just recognize, as you mentioned, that in this modern day and age, there's so much technological saturation in a person's life that starts at a very young age. Now the studies show that kids are being introduced to tablets and phones and computers as early as they're 1-2 years old, and that permeates all of culture. And while technology itself is not a negative thing, like a phone is not a bad thing per se, the effects of the technological saturation on communication and intimacy and relationships and life can be dramatic, and we see those effects with a lot of our participants. So we really do believe there's tremendous value in kind of getting away and unplugging and disconnecting and just being still, being quiet outside in nature, in the outdoors, can have really transformative, impactful effects on a person's mind, heart, body. And so that's really a core to what we do.
One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show and have other guests to talk about their experience and what they do in the outdoors is to really help those people that are maybe stuck. Because a lot of people that are listening to shows like this, listening to podcasts, are doing it on their way to work or on their way home to work. And they're really struggling either in their home life or just in their work life. And maybe they used to get out when they were young, and they remember these times when they were young that they felt free, but now they kind of feel trapped in their job or trapped with all the stuff that they've accumulated. And so my goal is to help people and bring this message of what others are doing so they can kind of get ideas and kind of get inspired to head to the outdoors and learn from others who actually utilize it for their emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
Yeah, and I think we share that same vision and goal and passion. Because, in talking with the individuals, the participants that come on our courses and on our expeditions, there is very much a sense of distraction. And I would say even an unfulfillment a lot of times for people, where they do feel trapped in their lives and they do want to get away. They do want to experience something, so to speak, bigger than themselves. And oftentimes getting outside can do that. For me, it's not just going on a 40-day expedition, although that can be transformational and have a huge impact. It could be as simple as going to a local park or even a state park, or on a walk. For a lot of people can be a very important and impactful daily or weekly rhythm to their lives. And I think sometimes it gets over-dramatized where people think, well, I got to go climb Mount Everest, or I've got to go float the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. And it can be as simple as just getting away for an afternoon or a morning to just reset, so to speak, the rhythm of your life and the confusion and the kind of that feeling trapped. So I advocate that for everybody.
Well, and I was just talking to someone earlier today about, she lives in Oregon, and she was saying how it rains a lot during the winter months up there, but how sitting out on a porch, we were talking about just kind of sitting out on a porch and listening to the rain, is very healing as well, rather than sitting on the couch watching TV.
Yeah.
And so there's all different kinds of things. And I'll let you, at the end of the show, we'll kind of talk about some different ideas that people can do to get outdoors. But I want to really talk about you and your life as far as kind of growing up and what you do in your life outside of business as well. Mm-hmm. And I always like to start off the show with a nature quote, because people love nature quotes, and they share them on pictures on Pinterest and all over the place now. People are sharing different quotes. And I know that when we talked in the beginning, you had not so much a nature quote, but a verse from the Bible that you like that has an impact on you. So if you could share that with us and tell us what that means to you.
Yeah, I think when I often think of just inspirational quotes that, as far as the outdoors are concerned in nature, I go back to Psalm 19, oftentimes verses 1 through 5. Verse 1 is simply that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. And night after night, they display knowledge or pour forth speech about who he is. For me, that's just very impactful because I recognize that for me, spending time outdoors is not necessarily the end, but it's a means to a greater end. And for me, that's just growing spiritually, exercising my mind, my body is also important. But that verse in Psalms 19 just really highlights that when I go out in creation, when I go out and see the things that God has made, it reveals who he is. And there's something inside of me that begins to quicken and awaken to who God is. And I see attributes by the things that he's created. And so it's very profound personally for me. So that's always a favorite quote or scripture that I like to think about.
It's a great one. And what you experience and what I experience, I want so many more people just to kind of experience that. Because a lot of people, they may not have a faith-centered life. But what I've discovered is just being outdoors has helped me grow closer to God. And,
absolutely.
Just because I'm aware, I can listen. I'm not so distracted, but I can listen and look and learn when I'm out there and completely unplug, like we talked about earlier. So thank you for sharing that. So I want to dive back into your life. And in the beginning, we talked about you going climbing with your father, uncle, and cousins. So I'd like to, because of my message and what I want to help people do is really start living with that childlike wonder like we used to. I like to share and listen to stories about people and their childhood experiences. So if you can take us back to a time when, during your childhood, maybe one of the first memories that you had when you first went climbing with your father and your uncle, what that was like and how that had an impact on you.
In hindsight, looking back through the years, I just so much appreciate my dad and his willingness to take me outside, take the family outside at very young ages, and in a very healthy way, challenge us physically, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually through those times. And there's two that really stand out. The first time I remember my dad taking me out, it was like a father-son kind of getaway weekend. And he showed me literally the ropes, so to speak, to climbing. And I was about 8 years old, maybe 7 years old. And he and I spent a weekend together, and he literally showed me how to do all the knots, how to belay, kind of these more technical aspects of climbing. And then we went out and we climbed together for the first time. And I remember that actually I was quite scared the first time I went climbing. It was very challenging. I had a lot of fear of being off the ground and heights. But what I do remember is my dad was belaying me. And for those that aren't really familiar with the technical verbiage, it's essentially he was the one holding the rope and securing me to the rock so that if I slipped or if I fell, I wouldn't go anywhere because he had the rope. And I remember him just very lovingly encouraging me just to keep going, that I could do it, that I could overcome the fear, that I could make it to the top, that it wouldn't be easy, so to speak, but that it would be worth it. And I remember crying and, pleading with him to let me down. And it wasn't in a mean way at all. He just knew that if I tried, that if I pursued, that I kept going, that I could do it. And so in a very healthy way and in almost a formative coming-of-age experience, he just kept encouraging me. And in the end, and I don't remember how long it took me, but in the end, I did get to the top. And I just remember how fulfilling and satisfying it was to think, wow, I started not thinking I could do this, actually believing I couldn't do it. And now I'm standing on the top, and it was such a great accomplishment and feeling. And then, of course, the bonding that created with my dad and the connection and connectivity to him, the whole experience and being outside was really profound. And then I remember another formative experience where he took me backpacking for the first time, where I actually carried my own backpack. We did a multi-day excursion where we went from camp to camp. We broke camp every day. We set up camp every night. And I was probably maybe 9 or 10 when we did that. And I remember very clearly that we had hiked for, it seemed like a lot of miles. It was probably really only 3 or 4 miles. And at the end of the day, we had to cross this snowfield in like early June. So the snow was melting and soft. And I remember that every step I took, I post-holed, which means that I would sink up to my waist in the snow. And I remember thinking, I am not going to be able to make it. I won't be able to get to camp. This is too difficult. This is too hard. I want to give up. And again, my dad just kind of lovingly encouraging me that last maybe quarter mile through the snow. And I was crying and there was tears and I couldn't do it. There's no way. It was not possible. But with his mentoring, his encouragement, his love, we got to camp. And I remember setting up camp, building a fire, cooking dinner, thinking the same thing with that rock climb. Wow, I can't believe I did that. I was convinced I couldn't. And now it feels so good to be on the other side of that experience and just enjoying this amazing, beautiful place with my dad. That those were really touchstone, kind of cornerstone moments in my life of being outside, being challenged, overcoming challenge and fear, doing it with people I loved, and having that grow and create this kind of formative coming of age in my heart that really, in a sense, shaped me for the rest of my life.
Just listening to that story and how it was so tough for you, but your dad lovingly encouraged you and support. And it's like, and I see that in your message today, and even in my own, is that it's so tough for people. Like we said, it's so tough for people to make it a priority in their life and get out and, not even know where to go or how to even enjoy the outdoors. But shows like this and companies like yours that can go in and encourage these people and just be there for support to help them experience that and get over those challenges in their life and the fears that they have to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's life-changing for a lot of people. It's paradigm shifting, if you will, for a lot of people.
Well, and that leads us right into my next question for you. And maybe you used what we talked about in the beginning about your experience on the Harrower Peak. But I like to go into an outdoor experience, and because we all have different, those of us that have been in the outdoor world, we have all these different experiences. There's always one that has an impact on us that changes I guess you would say, the trajectory of our life. And for example, like mine was after I left college back in the mid 90s, I had gone back home to help my dad open up a new pawn shop. And some friends of mine had invited me to go hiking in the mountains above where I lived in Ojai. Well, I had never been there because when I came of age and started driving, I had to work and go to school. When I was at college, I wanted to go and travel the world. I wanted to study abroad. But when I did go back home and I went to the mountains the first time above where we lived, it was so eye-opening to me that I realized I didn't have to go travel the world when I hadn't even discovered what was around my own backyard. So that was a place for me. Those mountains mean so much to me. And finding different places like that it's amazing when you do, because they have a huge impact. So I want you to go in and kind of tell a story of a place when a time when you visited the most beautiful place that you had ever been to, and how that changed, I guess, the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Because I grew up in this context, and I don't want to overstate it, but spending hours and days and weeks outside growing up. By the time I was a young adult, this is actually the story I'm going to tell was when I was in the summer of 1999, and I was 22 years old. I graduated college. There was a certain sense where I didn't necessarily take it for granted, but you become so accustomed to it that you just think this is the normal for everybody. There was a time when I was in the Wind River Range in central Wyoming, which for me is a very special, very beautiful place. It's one of probably the most beautiful places I've ever been, and had the opportunity to hike and mountaineer and climb in. We had taken a group, it was on a SRAM course, and we had taken a group to the top of this peak, Harrower Peak, which overlooks Titcomb Basin. It's one of kind of the most photographed, beautiful places in the Wind River Range. There's all these alpine lakes and wildflowers and these stunning granite peaks. And glaciers. It truly is incredible. And what we do when we get on top of these peaks with our groups is everybody just takes time a little solo time where we just carve out 15, 30, maybe as long as an hour of time just to be still and be by ourselves on top of this peak. And I remember looking out over Titcomb Basin from the top of Harrower Peak, just being utterly amazed at how incredibly beautiful this place was. I mean, it was literally like the beauty of what I was seeing just captivated my mind and my heart in such a real way that I was stunned by it. I was just literally taken back by how incredible this place was. And in that moment of just thinking how beautiful it was, I experienced, so to speak, God, the Holy Spirit, just speaking to my heart. It wasn't like a voice, like, oh, I heard God talk to me. It was like a still small voice in my heart. And the Lord was really just revealing to me in that moment that this was a beautiful place, that he had created it, and it was an amazing place that revealed who he was, that he was an amazing God that would create such an amazing place. And I sat there just stunned, like, wow, God, you really are amazing. You are incredible. And yet in the moment of that, he spoke to my heart and he said, but when I look down from heaven, I'm more captivated and interested in you than I am in this place. And that revelation of the love of God, the love of the Father, literally just in a moment undid all my preconceived notions of who God was and what it meant to be a Christian. I mean, literally it was like I was undone, because I experienced the love of God on that peak, that he would look down from heaven and just be interested in me because he created me in a sense. And I was stunned by that reality. And that moment, that revelation literally changed my entire life. It changed the direction of my life. I actually had every intention of going to grad school and being an attorney, a lawyer. And in that moment, I thought, I have to spend my life giving others the opportunity to experience what I've just experienced. That's really led me to where I am today. I had no plan and no intention of actually being involved with Solid Rock Strom full time, but that moment and that time on Harrower Peak changed me, and so it was pretty remarkable.
It is so amazing what nature can do for you. A couple years ago, I came across John Muir's book where he's talking about his experience in Yosemite, and I just want everybody to be able to get out there and to be able to experience what you and I have experienced out in nature and the grandness and the beauty that God has created. But like you said, he's created it for us, but he's created us, and he's more interested in us and what we do with our lives. What a profound experience that you have. And I hope others that are listening to this show, and I know that they will, when they get out and start enjoying places in nature, that they'll experience that because it does have a huge impact.
Yeah, it does.
It has what's called what I like to call the nature effect. And you, as someone who's always outdoors, well, for the most part, you spend a lot of your life outdoors. And I want to lead that into our next topic, which I call the nature effect. And it's basically how nature has an impact on you, the environment around you. And it's part of what God brings into our lives. How does it have an impact in your life today? Just constantly being around the environment that you're in.
Really it has this, I mentioned this word earlier, this holistic impact where, even when I wake up, I have 3 children, a wife. So I get up early, I take the dog on a walk, because our kids are a little too young to get up early and take the dog on a walk. But even being outside in the mornings, just taking your dog on a walk is just an opportunity to really think, just get clarity on the day, the different roles and responsibilities and tasks that are before me. And then in the midst of that, just thinking in that mental clarity, just a chance to pray, spend time with God, spend time with Christ in the morning, and just giving him my day and prioritizing that, and then enjoying just the sunrise. We don't live directly in the mountains, but you can see the mountains in the distance in both directions, and seeing the sunrise over the mountains is just a very wonderful experience. And so it has this like daily impact on me, even from the moment I get up to walk the dog to driving home and seeing the sun setting over the mountains and the color and the sky and the clouds, and just being really thankful for my life. So I think in some ways it has this effect of just making me aware of just the simplicity of life and how life can be really enjoyable in the simple things, and being appreciative of that. I think I'm just reminded when I see nature and the outdoors and creation that I am not the center, and that's a really good, healthy thing, like not to be the center or not think you're the center. And that in a small way, like I'm small and yet I have significance, so that you don't take yourself too seriously, but you don't sell yourself too short. So nature tends to have that effect on me. I realize that I'm small and yet I can have an impact. And so there's a simplicity. I don't know. I think it helps me order my thoughts and my affections in my heart, on a daily, weekly basis.
And that's what I want to help people understand. All this craziness that goes on, our lives can get so chaotic, especially if you live in the city. We don't have time. If we're not spending time outdoors, we're not able to get that clarity. The next portion, you talked a little bit about it, of that you wanted to go into. Your plan was to go and to be an attorney, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of as I graduated. Yeah.
Right. You talked about how that experience had changed your life, and you ultimately got involved with your dad's business and became the executive director. Can you expound on that and how that moment in time really, when you decided, okay, this is what I need to do, I need to go over it, and this is my path, and I want to be the executive director, I guess you would say.
Let me just say this, because I think this could be helpful for some of your listeners. To answer that question, I want to share a little bit about my dad's story.
Okay.
Because he did grow up in Los Angeles, in the 60s and 70s. He was the son of a lawyer, but he was also grew up in a fairly dysfunctional household. So externally there was a lot of success, as far as just material possessions, status in culture and society, but the home life was not healthy, and I don't want to speak too ill of my family who I love, but his dad was an alcoholic. The marriage ended up in a divorce, and it was very painful for my dad growing up as a young boy and as a young man in California or in LA in the city. But what he discovered at a young age, and he didn't grow up in a Christian home either. And so what he discovered as a young age is that he could go out into the foothills, and even as he grew older and could drive into the mountains of Southern California. And in a sense, he found a lot of solace and peace and rest, so to speak, for his soul. And in some ways, it helped him escape the chaos, the pain, the frustration, the anger of his home life and just his adolescent life, that kind of adolescent angst. Over time, he just began to develop this love for being outside, and that turned into rock climbing and mountaineering and really getting involved in the outdoor community when it was more of a subculture, when it was more countercultural in the 60s and 70s. And then that over time led him to his own faith conversion to Christ and becoming a Christian. And that moment of conversion in the subsequent years shortly after that, he realized that his faith and his love for the outdoors could be integrated into a calling or a purpose in life. So I think that's helpful for some of your listeners who don't come from like my childhood, where I did have a loving father who went a different way than his family did and nurtured and cared and had these awesome experiences for me and my sister and my mom. He kind of came out of the exact opposite of that, but yet the effect, so to speak, using your phrase, that effect that nature had on him was very similar, although we had two very different backgrounds.
Right.
And so growing up, leading to my own story, growing up, I knew that the effect and the impact that being outside could have on a person and on making a difference in a person's life, helping them change, grow, develop in character and leadership in their spiritual life. And so after that experience in the Wind River Range on Harrower Peak, really I had a clarity that this could be a calling and a life purpose for me. And so given my own faith, I really just began to fast and pray and seek wise counsel about whether or not serving at SROM could be a fit and kind of align with my gifts and talents. And just through kind of a season of discernment, that is kind of learning to listen and be still and wait on God, I just had a peace and a clarity that I could serve in this capacity and add, I guess, value and leadership to SROM and the mission that we're aiming for and we're passionate about here.
Well, thank you so much again for sharing that story. And there's so much that we could pull out of that. And one of the things that I definitely connected with was because what we're trying to do here is your dad and the environment that he grew up in LA, huge city, and California having so many different mountains and having, I mean, I grew up in California, but didn't until I was 35, actually 37, until I visited Yosemite for the first time and sequoias. But for him to be able to, once he got his license and was able to take a drive up to the mountains or the foothills of the mountains around LA, and just that experience that he had completely changed his family tree, I guess you would say.
It really did.
Because, of what you guys and millions of other people, or thousands, however many, but a lot of other people, just because of that one thing that he took in his life and started heading to the mountains. Now, look what's come of that with all these different things. So it's a great story, and thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, thanks.
So this next part is more some of the questions I was coming up with is to really help those people that are struggling, with what the outdoors can do with them, and really having ideas on what they can do to get outdoors and how nature or the lack of nature in their lives has an impact on them. So the first question is what do you do when you do get outdoors?
Great question. There's a physicality to it that I really enjoy, whether that's going on a run, backpacking, rock climbing up mountains. But I always am cautious to say that because I don't want someone to be intimidated and think, well, I don't do all those things, I can't go outside, because that's just not true. Just a simple walk, not even necessarily a quote unquote hike, a simple walk can just be such a great physical activity just to get outside. In the midst of that physicality and doing those physical activities, there's definitely this aspect of prayer, where I just like to spend time praying. I like to spend time, if I'm with others, just having quality conversations, just conversations that build connection and relationship and authenticity, and kind of get beyond the superficial talk of weather and sports, which aren't bad per se, but to really try and get outside and build quality relationships when I'm out there. So that's another thing I really like to do when I get outside. Then there's also just an aspect of worship, where I like to, given my faith background as a Christian, I just like to spend time worshiping God outside and praising him and thanking him for my life, just the many blessings I have. And then there's this idea of being still and maybe not going out and doing physical activity, but just sitting and being quiet and listening and resting, so to speak, my mind and my heart. I think there's just tremendous value in that. So you don't have to be some super athlete or some fitness guru to get outside. You can literally go to a state park or even a local park and just sit and be still and quiet. And I enjoy doing that when I get outdoors sometimes. So for me, there's really a range and a spectrum of things that I enjoy doing when I go outside and when I'm out in nature, out in creation.
You're one of those people that incorporated nature into your life, and there's definitely a lot of different things that you do. And you said something that I liked is for our listeners on Some More Outdoors, not a lot of people are spending enough time outdoors, but you said a simple walk to be able to go outside. And one thing I was thinking a few months ago was just the fact that when people are out walking, and I see people walk a lot of times where I live, and they've got their earphones on, or they're walking their dogs and stuff, but sometimes just going out there and imagine and taking a look at the different landscapes around your neighborhood, and just really, for me, absorbing that information, like when I was a kid and when we were kids, and the excitement of seeing a little animal or an ant, small as a little ant or whatever, or looking at the way a certain tree is growing, and just being, and maybe it's because of me and us that we're more aware of nature, but really allowing ourselves to be open to that first as well, and not necessarily getting out for the physical activity of it.
Right.
most definitely.
Absolutely. And sometimes I say there's the macro and the micro. And so sometimes you go out and you're just amazed at the macro, just the wonder of sun setting with these incredible clouds behind mountains. And sometimes you go out and you're just amazed at the micro of, like you said, an ant or a wildflower, or the way the grass blows in the wind across a field, or cherry blossoms in springtime on a tree in your neighborhood. And you can be captivated by the micro. Another thing that I've really enjoyed doing over the last couple of years is very simple, is just bird watching. And if you set up a bird feeder in your backyard, even in the middle of a city, you'd be surprised at just the variety of birds that will come into your yard, and just how enjoyable even that can be. Just to look at birds and their colors and their interaction, it can be really fun.
Oh, yeah.
So that's even something else I've started doing in the last couple of years.
Well, and it's funny that you bring that up, because there was one thing about a month ago or whatever, I was sitting outside at nighttime, and it was probably about 10 o'clock at night. The moon was out. But I have 9 redwood trees in my backyard, and there's a lot of, it's an older redwood or an older development back in the 80s, so all the trees in the area have grown up. One thing that I had never heard before, there was about 3 different birds, and they were spread out through the neighborhood. But one of them, the one that was in one of the redwood trees, started making a sound. And then a far off one, another bird, started mimicking the exact same sound that this one in the redwood tree. And then I could hear a third one do the exact same thing. And then the one in the redwood tree in my backyard, would make another sound, completely different sound. And the other 2 would mimic exactly. And so it was really neat just to be able to experience that. And because I had never heard that before. You hear birds chirping a lot, but these ones were actually mimicking each other. And I thought it was just it was really cool, and just to be able to have an experience like that. So yeah,
That's
definitely
awesome.
Listening to the birds on that. And when you don't, you obviously spend a lot of times outdoors, and I do too, but when you don't, what's the negative effects that you see in your life from not spending time outdoors?
I think maybe just a general restlessness, maybe even a sense of agitation, increased level of stress, maybe increased confusion, anxiety. I start to just become aware that I'm having far more kind of man-made inputs into my life, and it can create a lot, just kind of this hectic. Life is fast and crazy as is. And when there's not a chance, when there's not a reprieve, not a chance to rest or kind of unplug or get away, even for 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes, I guess I would say that it becomes kind of a restlessness or an agitation and even a confusion over time.
When that happens, how do you make sure that getting outdoors is such an important thing for you?
I mean, my wife and I do live pretty active lifestyle. So we will just make it a priority, and not in a selfish way, because we have children and we're aware of our responsibilities as parents, but we'll just dialogue with each other saying, okay, I'll watch the kids and you get away for a little bit, or you watch the kids, I'll get away for a little bit. And so I think it's, like you said, it's almost so integrated into our life that we just simply make it a priority. And like I said, that could be a 30-minute walk, or it could be a whole day out climbing. And a lot of times you just do it together as a family as well. So
absolutely, family
we just
and
kind
friends.
of make it part of our family time. Yeah.
And like you said earlier, developing those bonds.
Absolutely.
And really communicating, and not so much talking about the weather and sports, but really developing because something happens when we're out there with other people, and it's amazing that happens. So now you live in an area where, you said you have mountains on either sides, and most of the time, like I myself, I think we were talking about this at the beginning, before the recording, was I have a favorite spot that I like to go to get away up in Yosemite. Do you have one of those spots that you get away to think? And if you do, what does that place mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think locally I have probably 2 spots that I'll go to more frequently than others to get away. That's just a local climbing area. It's just a national forest area outside of town, about 20 minutes, called Vitavu. Kind of an interesting word, but yeah. Vitavu Medicine Bow National Forest. That's a real special spot that I've gone to, many times throughout my life. And then the other one would be on the opposite end of town, about 45 minutes away up in the mountains is the Snowy Range Mountains. Those are kind of like two local areas where I'll get away either to, spend time just quiet, sitting for a couple hours of the day, or I'll go out and just hike and be with someone or by myself to just process, reflect, think. But those two they do have a very special place in my heart. Just, if I've been struggling with something in life, to get away and process and think and kind of have a peace and pray about certain things. I've come to have answers in those places, these kind of favorite places. I've come to get clarity about decisions I've had to make, difficult conversations I've had to have, even direction about my life and future and family. And so they're meaningful in that I feel like I've had breakthrough or clarity or time with God in these places. So yeah, personally, they do mean a lot. Like I said, I consider myself very blessed just to have those places and those opportunities.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and the reason why I asked that question is because I found myself going to the same spot most of the time because I know where it's at. And I know that when I need to get somewhere, I know where I can go just to think. And I encourage everybody to just find a place like that near where you live. You can look at your local park and rec site. We're blessed on the West Coast to have so many different national parks around that we can go to and state parks that we can go to. And I'm just thankful that people, our ancestors have set aside time or set aside places that we can go to that. I encourage everybody to at least find some place where they can go that there's comfortable going with and that it's safe, that they can go and sit and think and just really absorb everything around them. So for people like some of the S'more Outdoor listeners that, work a lot and work in the city and that just don't have, like you said, our lives can get crazy and we're always, we're constantly on the go and it's always fast paced. A lot of people just they struggle with finding the time to get outdoors. And for us, we make it a priority. But what's the best advice that you might have you can share with us, with the listeners about how to, incorporate the outdoors more into their life when they struggle with actually making the time to get out?
That's a great question. I think, a practical thing would just be small wins, like 15, 30 minutes, 1 hour, once a week, maybe once a month, depending on the demands of a person. And I would even start as local as, it kind of sounds silly, but there's a lot of great local parks in a cities, neighborhoods where you can go. And I would just encourage you to go and walk and listen and unplug. Don't take the phone, don't take the iPod, and be still. Maybe sit, maybe walk, whatever. Just get some of those small wins. And I think with the small wins, people will start to see the value. And it becomes internally or self-motivating when you start to see the wins or the fruit, so to speak, of being outside, being in creation. And from my perspective, I really would encourage people to get out, pray, seek God while you're out there. And I found that in the midst of that, He meets people where they're at, and that can be very catalytic and transformational in someone's life. And so it becomes all the more motivating. Man, I want to do that again. I want to carve out more time. It becomes more of a priority.
Yeah. And just, asking some simple questions, when you're out there, what can I do for you? What do you need me to do?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of great ideas that have come from him just being out there and speaking to me. You mentioned also something about even if it's only an hour a week. It's funny that you say that because I like to talk about the weekly green hour. I know the National Wildlife Federation talked about came up with the daily green hour for kids. Mine is as adults, we get so busy that we don't spend as much time outside that we should. So at least incorporating a weekly green hour into our lives can have a huge impact on how we feel. Even if it's only once a week, it can have a huge impact on your whole week, on your whole work week. And I've experienced that just from growing up where I did and working 6 days a week, just being able to take that time out and to be able to do that.
That's awesome.
So awesome. So we're winding up the show now, Andrew, and I really appreciate all the insights and all the information that you've shared with us today, and really diving into your life and sharing about our business. Can you just speak to some people out there about just some words of encouragement about getting outdoors and about bringing the outdoors into their life, and then share with some more outdoor listeners how we can connect with you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I would just encourage people, as we work with a lot of young adults and adults, and even junior high and high school students, I think there's a sense, just kind of in modern culture, of maybe a sense of maybe loneliness or purpose or connectivity to others that seems to be lacking or growing in our culture. And the reality is that we text more than we ever have. We post on Facebook and online more than we ever have. And yet there's a growing sense of dissatisfaction and loneliness and not feeling connected. So it's not that Facebook is bad or texting is bad, but I think that there's a lack of depth in a lot of that. And I just really would love to encourage people that if you get outside, out in creation, one, it's an opportunity to spend time with the God of the universe who knows you and created you and loves you and has a purpose for your life. And two, it's an opportunity to do that and take someone you love or care about with you and begin developing meaningful relationship and quality time that really becomes a fabric of healthy community and healthy friendships. And I found that for someone to take the time to prioritize that in their life is well worth the investment that it is. The investment, I should say, has high return. And there's something that is lacking when we're watching TV and we're plugged in all the time, that we find satisfaction when we go out and we spend time outside and in God's creation with Him and one another. And so I just really want to encourage people to take that step. You don't have to be a super fit athlete. You don't have to be some outdoorsman or some Boy Scout or some great camper lumberjack. You just need to do some simple things like start getting out for the first time or maybe in the long time. And I think you'll see the rewards and the benefits. And as far as connecting with SROM, the easiest thing would be to go to our website, srom.org, and learn about the expeditions and the opportunities that we offer, because it could be a really great way for someone's son or daughter or themselves to experience a lot of what we've described today and then take that home and begin doing it themselves.
One thing that I did want to ask, how often, for those that live on the West Coast, how often do you do trips to Yosemite?
We don't do them as often because it's a little further outside of our region. It's not quite in our wheelhouse.
Right.
A lot of our trips to Yosemite are contract courses. So like a church or an organization calls us up and wants to do a course in that area. And so we'll build a custom course for them and come out and meet them there to do that experience.
Okay, well, cool. Yeah, I saw that when I was doing some research on the website for Yosemite. I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
You know? Well, once again, thanks so much for sharing your life, sharing your story and about SROM and what you guys do and your passion. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend and share with my listeners the impact that nature has on your life and how they can incorporate nature into their life for their emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
Thanks so much.
That's it for today's episode of S'more Outdoor. I'm just so excited to be here with you again today to share the stories and outdoor experiences from people like Andrew. A few things before I go. You can head on over to s'moreoutdoor.com to see the recap of Andrew's show on his show notes page, along with ways that you can connect with him. Just type Andrew in the search bar. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, we would love it if you would leave a comment on his page where Andrew and I will respond. To stay updated with new episodes, make sure you subscribe to the podcast by either clicking subscribe in iTunes, the subscribe button on Andrew's show notes page, or from the app on your phone. If you would leave a comment and rating for the show in iTunes, that would be awesome. This helps to get the show noticed so that others like you and I can learn about how the nature effect can have an impact in their lives and become inspired by these stories. Also, like us on Facebook at facebook.com/smoreoutdoor and follow us on Twitter. My username is at BATrout. That's BATRAUDT. And make sure you sign up at S'more Outdoor. That way you won't miss any exclusive content that I send out. So I hope Andrew's story has inspired you to reconnect with nature and start living with childlike wonder again. Thank you for tuning in to the show that's changing lives around the world. Until next time, I challenge you to do something this week to get S'more Outdoor.